officer for to another episode of the Bitcoin Well podcast. We have had an exciting week. Over the last week, we have seen Bitcoin climb more than $15,000 in US value, the largest weekly candle. At the time of this recording, we're hovering just over $78,000 USD in price. I'm your host, Q, and on today's very special episode, I'm joined by two friends, and we are going to go down quite a few rabbit holes. Have your tinfoil hats ready, and be sure to throw in all of your comments, questions in the chat. We will be engaging with you guys in real time. I'm joined by none other than Rod Palmer, everyone's favorite Twitter slot poster, the main man behind the Bitcoin Bugle, or at least I will call him the main man behind Bugle Media, and of course, none other than Chief Pepe Officer GMONEY. Gentlemen, welcome to the pod.
What is happening, my brothers? Good to see you.
Let's before we get into the craziness of what this conversation will be, I want to first just, get everyone a little excited. I know I just told all of our audience, get your tinfoil hats ready. I'm not going to assume they have their tinfoil hats ready. So while they're getting that stuff ready, just talk to me about how euphoric that 15K pump was for each of you. Rod, I'll start with you.
It's important. It's just very important. It's important after the brutal few months we've had price-wise. It's important after all the toxicity, all the fighting, the plebs forking off, the culture wars, the node, everything. We needed something. We needed a pump. We needed a reason to dunk on Peter Schiff again. And honestly, if you were pro, if like me, I was in the trenches in the pleb slot battles and the wars. And it was so great to have it right after the failed fork attempt to just have that like secret pump. It just breathed life into the community and to me and to the podcasters.
Yeah, it was definitely, waking up and realizing like, oh, I jumped a tax bracket in my net worth. It was a great feeling to say the least. GMONEY, I think we've given enough time for everyone. I am not kidding. You need a tinfoil hat for today's episode. It's going to be one of those. If you don't follow GMONEY, you are doing Twitter wrong. But
if
the mic is yours.
The Bugle, and you don't follow Rod, you're doing X wrong as well. But like the last 9 months of Bitcoin have been absolutely insufferable, right? Like I've been here almost 10 years, but the last couple of months was even more severe, right? You had the ColdCard hack, you had the Biptardians, and you had everybody at each other's throats when in fact, like all the corruption, 99.9% of the corruption is not inside of Bitcoin. It's the outside world. And it's just crazy that, Bitcoiners are fighting against the Michael Saylors. They're fighting against the David Baileys. They're fighting against the only people in the movement that are actually putting their balls on the table to move this forward, right? And so I'm glad that those psychopaths have forked off and we've continued because, look, humanity was given a 15-year head start to adopt this technology and move it forward. And the pleb slop revolution didn't happen. Like I would have wished people around the world would have woken up to Bitcoin and as many people would have got some and self-custodialed it and all that stuff. That was my hope, but that didn't happen. And in order for us to win this war, it has to move forward. It cannot stall. And these are probably secondary, tertiary fallback plans that have to move this ball forward. And that is what Michael Saylor is doing. That is what David Bailey is doing. That is what Trump is doing. And so we are getting into the end game of this entire revolution, as I call it. And, that pump is really what a lot of us came here for in the first place. And it's what's going to get young people excited. It's what gets, right, the many of us that have suffered so long through the craziness of the psyops. And, it's better that we catch the retards off guard. It's better that we, catch the Wall Street thieves off guard. And they don't even know what's going on. And so this is beautiful because what's completely unexpected, and that's how Bitcoin works, right? It punishes the non-believers, it punishes the tourists, and we're back, baby. Let's go.
We're gonna dive into it, but I again just want to remind everyone who is watching, if you are not aware, Bitcoin Well is the only non-custodial exchange available in the United States. That means that as you buy Bitcoin, it is sent directly to your self-custody cold storage wallet. Feel free to hop on over to bitcoinwell.com, use promo code podcast, and you'll get some additional wishing well points that you can use to get free Bitcoin. So use the only non-custodial exchange in the game in the US. We're available all over the world. And if you're looking to move a larger amount of Bitcoin, go to bitcoinwell.com/infinite and set a time with one of our Bitcoin advisors who will guide you all the way from starting your account to getting that Bitcoin in your cold storage wallet. But let's get into it a little bit. I want to first start with just, you bring up the orange man, and you and I have had long conversations about this. I have been very vocal about this, and I firmly believe that Trump has done more harm to the growth of Bitcoin than helped actually push it forward. The examples that I will point to quite simply are the fact that by Trump associating himself with Bitcoin, Bitcoin is naturally apolitical. However, the Democrats are as smooth-brained as their Republican counterparts, and all they will see is, well, Trump said it, so therefore we must be against it. I believe that that will do more harm to the long-term prospects of Bitcoin in the short term. In the next 10 years, I don't think the Republicans will hold every house of Congress, Senate, they will not hold the House, Senate. They will not hold the presidency over the course of the next 10 years, like all on their own. And when the Dems get in charge, potentially one of the things that they will come after and attack is Bitcoin, simply because Trump was a proponent of Bitcoin. That's just the first layer of what I think Trump has harmed as far as his involvement with Bitcoin. Then we've been promised and told we're getting a strategic Bitcoin reserve. And sure, the DOJ has confiscated countless Bitcoin, more Bitcoin than all of us watching on this pod, listening combined have. And yet still, we have not seen the US government make steps to growing that stack. And we've also watched Trump and his family enrich themselves in ways that would have made Republicans scream about Hunter Biden's laptop. And yet I hear silence from the right when we hear and see that Barron Trump has now a net worth of $150 million. We see the insider trading happening all throughout these Kalshi and Polymarket type of futures markets that have been created and propped up, not to mention the wheeling and dealings, the currying of favors of, I'll invest in Eric's Bitcoin mining company, and then we'll turn around and we'll give Justin's son a pardon. So I want you to defend the fact that you believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that Trump has been net good for Bitcoin, when I can list and can keep listing examples of ways that he is harming the larger movement.
Sure. Why don't we zoom out a little bit? Okay. I think the problem we have as Bitcoiners is we're so focused on the day-to-day media and the outrage and the emotions and all the stuff that's wrapped in, like, that's what they want us to pay attention to a lot of the time. And I think a lot of Bitcoiners come from the perspective that Bitcoin was just randomly made by some guy in his basement while his mom was making lasagna, right? Like that's that, or the meatloaf. I picture, what is that movie?
Mom,
the
Wedding
meatloaf,
Crashers.
Yeah, Wedding Crashers, right? And like Satoshi's in there making Bitcoin. It's like, Ma, the meatloaf, bring it down, right? And like that perspective to me just doesn't make any sense at this point, right? And so let's look at, all the wars we've battled, this entire, the history of the human race, right? Every major war has been a banker's war. Okay, full stop. Okay, and I think you guys can all agree with like some of these baseline premises. And then, here is this, you get things that happen. You get the Titanic that blows up or crashes into an iceberg. You get the creation of the Federal Reserve, right? You get the taxation being put in the same year as the Federal Reserve. And so what you see is a very slow, methodic plan of entangling the entire world through the creation of money. And if you believe that the entire world is evil and that we're never going to get out of this, then, I would say, a lot of the stuff Trump has done is probably bad. But if you do believe that there are good people out there, which I do believe, I believe that someone one day said, you know what, we should probably fix this problem, because at one day, the entire world is going to be ran by social credit scores, a central bank digital currency, and the entire race of humanity will be enslaved. Okay. And I truly think that those were the two roads, right, that we had to deal with. And so you kind of take a look at this technology created called Bitcoin. And you look at it, it's essentially American nuclear proof technology. TCP/IP, right? DARPA. GPS, right? Was the I think it was the Navy or something. SHA-256, right? NSA. You got Tor browser, Navy. All these technologies are very specific to United States military technology. Okay. And so you realize that this technology that was brought about was kind of like an immaculate conception. It wasn't a shitcoiner that tried to release something. He released it to the whole world. They released it to the whole world. Gave everybody a fair shake to find this technology. And then you kind of zoom into kind of where we're at today. And you have, admirals talking about power projection. You have the Secretary of War talking about, hey, if we're going to help Bitcoin or deter Bitcoin, like, we're keeping that classified. And you get to the point where the President of the United States is implementing a crypto Bitcoin standard. And I look at things in an adversarial way, and I'm saying, why would the President of the United States, who has the dominant military force, the dominant reserve currency, want Bitcoin in the first place? He is literally the last person on earth that should be promoting this technology, because, as we know, right, Bitcoin itself debases the power of central governments, debases the power of presidents, because it will not allow them to create energy for free in the future. And so I like to zoom out, because I think when you zoom out, you get a clear picture of what this actually is. And to me, this is not just a monetary revolution, but this is a sovereignty revolution. And in my opinion, right, I'm trying to build Bitcoiners, their intensity and their belief in this technology, not from just number go up, right, but from an actual good versus evil perspective, that this is the fight. This is the revolution. It's not politics. It's not the clowns you see on TV. It's literally within you and all of our own choice, our consent through compliance or non-compliance, whether or not you're going to support good or you're going to support evil. And in reality, what we're fighting is a culture war. We're getting into where billions of people across the world are being stolen from at a systemic rate and don't know anything about crypto. They have no idea what this new technology is. It's scary. It's computers. It's all these different things. And to me, if you're trying to bring about this revolution and bring as many people along as you need to, you're going to have to cast the widest net, because nobody even knows what the hell this is. You didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it was. None of us knew when we got it. We bought the shitcoins. I bought the shitcoins. Okay. In fact, today is the anniversary of me sending 0.85 Bitcoin to a scammer 10 years ago to buy a bottle of booze that never showed up at my door. Okay. So I can tell you, I was the original rug pull guy. I got rug pulled from trying to buy fake whiskey online 10 years ago. Today is that anniversary, funny enough. And so 0.85 Bitcoin, I don't know, do the math, right? The whiskey never showed up, but I stuck around and did my research. Sorry, and so that's really kind of like my perspective on this. And I'll kind of land the plane there for you guys to comment.
I mean, look, your dog was barking because that was absolutely unhinged. But I do love the fact that you did try to buy whiskey with Bitcoin. I guess after Laszlo bought pizza with Bitcoin. Would that be right?
Yeah, 2015, 2016, something like that.
Yeah. But Rod, I brought you here because I needed, I don't know, a counterweight to GMONEY's craziness before I absolutely lose my mind. I will let you comment, and then I have questions.
I hate to throw you under the bus here, but like, I disagree with your statement about Trump and being bad for Bitcoin, because I think we're overthinking it a little bit. The only reason we're talking about Trump being bad for Bitcoin is because the price is down considerably. If the price was 500,000 per coin, nobody would be having this conversation. But at the end of the day, Trump, I don't know if he sees it, who helped him see it, but we're kind of entering a new era. A lot of people think the world's going to get better or politics are going to go back to normal once Trump's gone. That we're going to go back to whatever, I'm not you necessarily, but a lot of people. And it's whether we're still in the first turn or the fourth turning or we're entering the first turning, politics are changing. Donald Trump knows that if the Democrats win in the midterms and then they win again in 2028, they're going to come after him. They're going to come after his assets. They're going to come after his wealth. They're going to come after his family. Whether or not Scott Bessent and Donald Trump want to blow up the bond market, whether or not Barack Obama wanted to set the US dollar as the global reserve currency on a path to that not being the case anymore when he weaponized the US Treasury against Iran and Russia, and when we did it again, when Russia, whether or not they intended to do that, it's happening. And I don't think that Trump, I don't think that doesn't really have much of a choice of protecting that long term anymore. So they see that this global reserve currency status, whatever, is going to be shorter lived. It's not going to be around forever. And they're using Bitcoin strategically, personally, at a political level, at the federal level. When they talk about the strategic Bitcoin reserve, they're using it and they're going to benefit from it if they hold on to it long term. Donald Trump's making what? He made $1 billion from his crypto scams at 80 years old. Sure, the Democrats may come after this in policy at some point, but everybody sees that Donald Trump is making money from crypto. Is it corrupt? Sure. Who's not corrupt? He's making money from crypto. Iran is using Bitcoin to get around sanctions. Now, if you keep it on an exchange, it's going to get seized, but they're using it. They're talking about using it to make people pay a tax to cross the Strait of Hormuz. People are using Bitcoin, and whether it's got negative headlines, whether the Democrats or Republicans like it or not, everybody sees that it's useful. If Donald Trump leaves office and has to go to Dubai and live off Bitcoin, well, it's better than being in prison here in the United States. So I think what we talk about and what is you see big Bitcoin, right? They're constantly saying NGU at all costs. NGU solves all problems. Like I said, if the price was double what the all-time high was, nobody's saying Donald Trump's bad for crypto or bad for Bitcoin. And I think that in the short term, it's really, it leads to this narrative. The long term, it's setting things like the Democrats can come after if they want, but Wall Street, financial advisors, people have this in their portfolio. They can't it's not going to be just as easy as we're going to ban this or we're going to attack this. It is ingrained. It is inseparable from the economy. It's inseparable from all these data centers we're building that are we're mortgaging the future of our energy infrastructure, of our entire economy on winning the AI race. And these AI data centers are who owns the properties? A lot of them are old Bitcoin miners. A lot of them are still doing Bitcoin mining as a hybrid. Overall, I think I can see why people think it's bad, but I think it's just a short-sighted opinion.
So I'm going to smooth braid this for a second because my ears cringe when you say Iran. It's Iran. As an Iranian, I invite you to pronounce it the way that Iranians do. So I'm going to start with, let's talk on that side of it because I think you're absolutely correct. We have now watched multiple presidents use the SWIFT system as a weapon. We have watched since Clinton, Iran be put under such crippling sanctions that they shouldn't exist. This is something I used to talk about at Bitcoin Magazine in the lead up to Russia invading Ukraine. Conveniently, Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin would regularly meet with the Iranian president at the time, the one who passed away in the helicopter crash, whose name is escaping me at this moment. And I am a firm believer that there was really only one topic of conversation happening there. How over 40 years under US sanctions have you continued to stay in power? How has your government been able to operate despite being cut off from the rest of the world? And they took the Iranian playbook, and then Russia, shortly after those meetings, invaded Ukraine. And I do believe that our children, well, my children, since GMONEY is like 100, will will learn about World War III having been started the moment the US kicked Russia off of the SWIFT system. I also just want to point out something, because like I'll shout out Max Kaiser, who sent me on this rabbit hole and pointed this out, and then I did a lot more digging, and I firmly believe this. All of these quote unquote nuclear facilities that, oh, they're enriching uranium, are actually nuclear power plants that Iran has built up. They are not building a nuclear weapon. They actually are the world leader in nuclear energy. This is a proven fact. What happened in the, what was it? What did they call it? The 12-day war, 10-day war, when we started bombing all of their nuclear facilities in June 2025. If you actually look, the global hash rate took a sharp crash during that time. That only, to me, proves again that what we were actually bombing was not an enrichment center, but it was a nuclear power plant. Small one, but enough to power a Bitcoin mining operation. In Iran, playing 3D chess, they don't hoard all of their Bitcoin in one wallet. So it's not something to where you would be able to say, oh, like this one wallet or these 10 wallets belong to some nation state that is a huge Bitcoin holder, but it's spread across thousands of wallets. And I do believe that in the next couple of years, we will come to learn that Iran is the nation state with the largest amount of Bitcoin, because they've been quietly mining Bitcoin because the cost of energy in that country is so cheap. And to your point,
and they've been selling a shitload of it, which is part of the reason we went from 126,000 to where we are, today. Well, a week ago we were lower, but we started the war. But you said when we bombed Fordo and those places, they've known what was coming, what's going on right now. Exactly. They saw the writing on the wall. They have been liquidating, and people have been liquidating gold, like these assets that ran up and then plummeted. Well, how does Iran afford to finance anything, to defend themselves, to have any energy, to have any food, to have any defense? They were selling Bitcoin.
No, exactly. And I mean, look, this again goes back to my whole issue with the approach of economic sanctions, where you sanction a country that controls through the government the most sought after resource in the world in oil and gas. Like, let's be perfectly clear. Qatar does not produce natural gas. Iran has natural gas that they let Qatar mine and sell to the rest of the world. They sell that gas at a discount to Qatar, who then sells it at the market rate to the entire world. No different than the way India does not actually have oil, but they buy Iranian oil for 50 cents on the dollar or 25 cents on the dollar, and then India turns around and sells it to the rest of the world, chiefly China. So you have created a system where the most sought after resource in the world that people will still buy is being sold at a discount by the government that will control all of the money. And just through a bad crop yield, because Iran, no different than the US, can be self-sufficient. It has the topography of the US where every single type of like natural environment exists in Iran. They can grow any food that they want and need. They had a bad drought for the last 5 years, and the people there are literally starving for food and resources because they wake up every day with their currency that is government issued continuously debased, because they themselves as citizens cannot enter the global marketplace. If someone from Iran tried to get a job at Bitcoin Well, they would immediately be rejected. And yet we have no problem hiring remote workers all around the world at any US based tech company, but not these sanctioned countries. And yet the government that controls these resources is still able to cut deals, enrich themselves. But now I'm taking us too far in a different direction, and I want to bring the plane back on course for a moment. I don't believe that, like, when you say that if Bitcoin's price was at $500,000, we wouldn't be talking about what Trump did was good or bad for Bitcoin. The truth of the matter is this, and maybe you guys disagree, this 15K pump was, in my opinion, entirely driven by Bessent and the Treasury Department's willingness to start buying back bonds. And the writing was on the wall when we started trying to help Japan and buying yen for the first time in God knows how many years now. And we are inflating the market no different than we did in the lead up to COVID and then in COVID. And we're going to do it again. And while we will celebrate the price of Bitcoin going higher, I'm always reminded of that scene in The Big Short, where the two young investors are celebrating making the deal of their lifetime, and Brad Pitt is upset because the deal of their lifetime means that they're betting on people losing their homes, people losing their jobs. And I think that's something that we have to be consciously aware of when we talk about, like, oh, well, when Bitcoin gets to $1 million, like, well, what happened to get there? And I don't think it's just a natural progression of, like, this state adopts it and they're buying a Bitcoin. Like, price moves because there are more buyers than sellers. That is the natural economics at play in marketplaces like the price of Bitcoin. And so my question to you is, what do you think would it take to get us to a 500,000 price of Bitcoin? And is that something that the everyday citizen will not feel some sort of pain for the price of Bitcoin to get there? And I'm not saying that whatever we do is directly to just see the price of Bitcoin go up. The price of Bitcoin going up is a secondary effect of whatever other actions we take.
Just one quick comment on the Persia stuff, because I'm actually half Persian, and I actually prefer to call Iran Persia because that is the pre-Hitler naming.
That's the name the
of
Greeks.
territory.
That's the name the Greeks gave us.
Anyways.
Okay. No. I'm going to scold you.
No, we're not.
Darash, I'm scolding you. No, I'm scolding you. In Farsi, how do you say Persian?
Okay, I'm not going to say. We're getting
on topic. It's not. No, because it's not a word in Farsi, because it's not how we call ourselves. Iran translates to land of Assyrians. That is what we are. Persian was just the name that the Greeks gave us. It's not a name we've ever called ourselves.
The great Persian Empire lasted a hell of a lot longer than Iran has been around. And let's be honest, right? The whole, like, Hitler thing was actually probably more renamed by the Zionists. Okay. And so when we talk about this stuff, again, we have to step back, because, again, we're zoomed in on this stuff. And if we understand that the country of Iran has been like a hermit nation for over 50 years, ever since the CIA allowed the revolution to take place, right? Which was our doing, right? I think there's no
100%
actual rebuttal about that. Then we have to understand that Iran's been under the control of the Zionists, City of London, NWO, whatever you call it, for more than 50 years. That's because
I've seen you post this, and I finish this point because I so don't agree with this, but I'd love to hear your take on this.
Yeah. And so, like, the grift off the Iranian oil trade is actually what built the entire British Navy. Okay. So
yes,
we can argue about some of the stuff, but, like, basically money laundering. Okay. And we don't have to get into the details, right? Q.
Let's get into the details.
Well, here's the thing. The thing here is that the grift of the Iranian oil trade, because they were going to actually nationalize their oil, like Gaddafi did, it would have basically enriched the country, would have enriched the citizens. And instead, right, what you have is an Iranian oil grift that has now enriched other nations, okay, on the backs of the Iranian people. And when you look at what's happening with the bombings and everything, and you see all of a sudden Trump pivot to now a shadow banking war, right, economic D-Day from Bessent and the others, you realize that this war isn't just about, nuclear weapons. There's something else going on inside that country through money laundering and shadow banking that a lot of us probably don't know what's happening. Okay, whether it's laundering it through Bitcoin, whether it's laundering it through Zionist regime or American politicians or whoever, we don't know. But it is interesting that the Trump administration has made this a banking war all of a sudden instead of about nuclear weapons. And so I think that's an important pivot that Trump is doing and Bessent is doing. And one other topic to wrap it back into what Bessent is doing if you go back to Donald Trump's first term, when all that money was being printed, okay, during COVID, you realize that right after COVID was announced, right, or around March or whatever, 2020, Trump and Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary at the time, put a guy by the name of what's his name? Bill? No, hold on. The chief legal officer, Brian Brooks. Sorry. So in 2020, Steve Mnuchin and Donald Trump put Brian Brooks as the head of the OCC. The head of the OCC controls the entire banking infrastructure inside the United States. Okay. Those two gentlemen actually made it legal for banks to custody Bitcoin back in 2020. So back when Trump was quote tweet Bitcoin is thin air, he was actually making the chief legal officer of Coinbase as the head of the OCC, and even actually recommended him to be the director of the OCC. But of course, the Senate Democrats blocked it and didn't allow it to happen. But instead, it still got through because of the temporary assignments his position allows. And so all these connecting dots during that time frame actually rolled up the Fed inside the Treasury. So if you go back and look, there's an article by Jim Bianco that talks about all the different moves that were made in 2020 that essentially rolled the Fed up inside the Treasury. And if you go back to what JFK did, he did the same thing with Executive Order 1110. Executive Order 1110 removed the ability for currency to be created with interest attached to it, okay? And essentially, the movements that was happening during the JFK administration are very similar in the fact that rolling up the Fed in the Treasury is what Donald Trump also did. And if you extrapolate that to where we're at now, you see that Scott Bessent is actually directing monetary policy now. The head of the Treasury is the one directing monetary policy, not the Federal Reserve, okay? Which is a very key distinction. Typically, it's the Fed leading monetary policy, but now you have the Treasury leading the secretary. And so here, I'll land it here, right? The Trump administration has filled its entire cabinet full of Bitcoin maximalists. Scott Bessent, Treasury Secretary. Warsh, Fed chair. Okay. We have Steve Mnuchin, Brian Brooks from the other previous administration. You have, Lutnick and the rest of them. And so it's interesting, to say the least, that these things have now come full circle.
Thanks you. Dan, to answer your question, we got on this topic is you're right. Like the flow of funds and liquidity are basically how prices move, especially in these massive market cap, multi-trillion dollar, all the flows going into AI, right? It led to this AI boom that Bitcoin basically, a lot of people seem to suffer from when everybody pivoted to AI. And if they do this operation twist, if they go in and start buying back all these long bonds with billions and billions of dollars and all of the background and context for why they're doing it, if GMONEY's right about this, and just all this flow of money starts going into Bitcoin and it goes to $500,000 per coin, I don't want to sound insensitive, but it reminds me of the biblical story of Noah's Ark. He's building the ark and everybody's criticizing. We got plebs, we got Bitcoiners out there listening to podcasts, sharing pleb slop with everybody they know, all their family group chats, going to Thanksgiving, just annoying the shit out of everybody, constantly telling them they're going to print the money. Nothing stops this train. You pick your meat. They've been warning, and people have been ignoring them. Some people listen, some people take it seriously. Most people ignore them, others ridicule them. So if this sends Bitcoin to whatever price, and I'm not saying that that's going to happen or it's going to be that quick or that easy, but hypothetically, and all of the economic consequences, the second order effects, the homelessness, the despair, that stuff is going to happen. And whether or not Bitcoin going to 500,000 is what causes economic despair, famine, shortages, energy shortages, whether that's Bitcoin's fault or not, it's coming. And the people who are on the ark, they'll be in a much better position. And I guess at the very least, once it happens, it's not necessarily too late for everybody. The people who ignored, tuned out, ridiculed all the plebs, all the slop, all the orange pilling effects, all that stuff's going to be like, oh, I remember these conversations now. Oh, I remember Jack Dorsey said they're never going to stop printing. Like all this stuff is going to, and they're going to know, hopefully, how to make the right decision. Hopefully they're not like, well, this XRP is going to, now this to the moon or whatever, like last time. But, these bad things, this reckoning, this comeuppance is coming whether or not they stuff and hide all the inflation in Bitcoin or not.
And I think honestly, I think that's a better route. Like, imagine if the Treasury and the Patriots were basically stuffing all the inflation into Bitcoin versus all the commodities, right? Which would hurt the people the most. And that's really just natural selection at that point. Like if you don't adopt fire, you're gonna get cold. And I don't think we can feel bad for people. Like it's not about feeling bad. It's that the evolution of our species, which has basically been domesticated and corralled, like has to snap out of it. And so when you think they can stuff all the inflation into Bitcoin versus like meat prices going up 1,000%, like that's a better scenario, I think, because they've stuffed inflation into only assets that the rich people can own, like houses and equities and all this other crap. Now they've stuffed inflation into an asset that is fully sovereign. Anybody in the world can get, and they can participate, right? That's the whole beauty here is that now we have 8 billion people that can participate in private property, where in some parts of the world, you can't even have that for a lot of them. And so I like that perspective as well.
And, like Zoltan Pozsar talked about this. He wrote like some really long newsletters where he went research about what China was doing and a few other countries is recent or as early as like right after 2008. So especially when the Euro crisis occurred in like 2011, they started to like experiment with these commodity-backed loans, these commodity-backed securities. And like, you're right, like that's what they would go to. It'd be like a gold, oil, whatever type of standard, stuffing it in Bitcoin, at least maybe, I don't know if it gets rid of them, but it like can mitigate some of the energy shortages, crop shortages, et cetera, and kind of have more of a egalitarian outcome, at least more so than just like hoarding all the oil.
Yeah, look, I agree with everything you guys are saying and bringing up. I even Rod, to your point, like I have always believed that the next form of global money, we won't immediately go from the dollar to Bitcoin. I think there will be a stop between them where it will be some form of like a basket of goods like gold, oil, other things that are backing a new form of money, but that eventually there will be so many of these types of monies and no one will trust. The US will not trust the fiat currency from Russia. Russia will not trust the fiat currency from Europe, to where the only form of trustless money that exists is Bitcoin because it is properly vetted. But to go back, GMONEY, to your point, like I was talking to my brother about this and he was like so confused by the decision making of Bessent and Trump right now, because it's like the incentives that are being created by sanctioning now 60 plus different businesses in countries that do dealings with Iran. You are incentivizing now not only Iran, but these other businesses to look at Bitcoin as a way to continue operations, because that's no, it's not. But
Okay,
but my point remains, like what we were talking about before the camera started. Like I don't think Trump is doing that because he's like, yes, do that, and then they'll all go to Bitcoin and then we'll win. It's like I think he thinks he's strong arming these places and doesn't fully grasp that he can't control Bitcoin.
Okay, so what we're seeing now is you see Hyper-Stablecoinization. Okay, that's what's happening. Okay, that's what the Clarity Act, that's what the Genius Act is going to provide. And you're talking about this soft landing, right? Because a turmoilous, chaotic event where we just switch to Bitcoin is too disruptive, right? The entire world would just go completely into chaos. Okay, more chaos and the more disruption, the more death you have, actually, right? A lot of people will die in those scenarios. Okay, and so what you see is with stable coins is an off ramp, a pressure release valve. if you may, right? To where it will allow not only all these other different countries access to the dollar, because right now a lot of them can't get access to the dollar. So if you think about all these tyrannical regimes that are out there, right? And there's a bunch of them. A lot of them survive on the creation of their own fiat currencies. Like, let's be honest, right? Little tyrannical regimes that create their own fiat currencies are able to control the power and control where the money flows. Using the dollar as the base system actually takes that power away from them. Okay. So if their entire population is running to the dollar and the people keep printing more money and they realize it's just going to be worthless, like you're capturing not only the tyranny, but the people that are believing in that. And so what happens then, right? You get hyper-dollarization because now everybody can access to it. Okay. Via hyper-stablecoinization. Okay. And funny enough, right? Hyper-Stablecoinization actually will lead to Hyper-Bitcoinization, okay? And Bitcoin is the most American thing ever created. And so really what you get is you get a world of hyper-Americanization through the spread of property rights, through the spread of sovereignty, through this technology. So instead of freeing people by dropping bombs on them, right? The old neocon way of liberating people, right? By dropping bombs on them, we're now just liberating them through technology. And we're doing it with the dollar. We're doing it with stablecoins. And finally, we're doing it with Bitcoin. And to me, it's a beautiful, masterful plan. And again, this comes back to the point, America needs Bitcoin and stablecoins the least. Why are we pushing it? Okay. And I think that's an interesting, because we got to think in these adversarial terms. And, you know, Donald Trump's plan for a lot of this stuff, he's not going to come out and tell everybody what his plan is. Like, these are wars, right? We're literally in a banker's war right now. Bitcoin is the war to end all wars, right? The soft war, actually, to end all wars. And so when we think about it from a military perspective, that this war is being conducted with very fine tuning by people in our government through the use of the dollar, I think you'll see a very well-crafted plan where everything has been thought out of, and that some of these things are being allowed to be a little bit disruptive and chaotic, that are controllable chaos, okay? Because you can control small chaotic events. If one huge catastrophic event happens, there goes the whole freaking plan. And so what I think is these events are being managed, they're being on-roaded, off-roaded, and we're being onboarded and transitioning into a Bitcoin standard. We just don't know it yet, right? Because there's so much chaos, there's so many shiny objects in the political world that we're just kind of caught up in some of this stuff. And so that's the perspective and the lens I like to use, because right now what you have is JP Morgan is saying they're going to launch a stablecoin. Bank of America, right? All this stuff is happening because if they don't adapt, they die, right? And what does the new language have? Q, right? They have to fully back their reserves with Treasury bills. This isn't rehypothecation anymore, right? This isn't, I'm going to go deposit $100 and the bank's going to go lend out, right, $1,100. Okay, this is, hey, you want to issue a stablecoin? You have to have full reserves. And so, in fact, it's actually taking this evil energy that's surrounding us and it's converting it to pure golden energy, to Bitcoin via stablecoins. And so what I like to think is, wow, like we're actually reverse engineering the collapse that they wanted to happen to where it's actually fixing itself, because now you're going to have banks that are fully collateralized. You're going to have banks that have fully reserved assets on stable, and no longer will they be able to print money and lend it out for free in this new world. And so, I think those moving things will show that.
And I think that you got to the point, like the stable coins create demand for treasuries. And we talked about, like, we've been cutting people off from the dollar. People haven't been able to get access to dollars. So they have to use these weaker currencies. They have to find other solutions. We're getting to the point where we're going to start forcing the stable coins on people. And I think there was they talked around this a few months ago when we first struck that ceasefire / peace attempt deal with Iran, with the $300 billion where we're going to inject it. And I believe they mentioned it briefly, but I was speculating they're going to do this with Tether or stable coins, because we talked about earlier all this money laundering and like how this money's shifting, who's trading, what's coming into China, what's going to Russia. It's very opaque. It's funnels through, Qatar. And with stable coins, with Tether, they can follow it all on chain. They can sit back and watch, where does the money go? Follow the money. It's like a term, right? Like they can inject especially these corrupt countries where we're like giving billions of dollars in aid for some strategic reason. Maybe we want peace. Maybe we just want like keep them from like going, butchering their neighbors, whatever. And we give them all that money. And then of course, like these dictators or whoever's the head of state, they spend it on, whatever, Lamborghinis, like if you're Ukraine, oligarch, whatever. But we start giving them stable coins. Now we can follow it. Now we can see where it's being spent. Now we can turn it off. And there's got to be more people, especially in some of these places that are like, I want access to Tether on Tron or Tether on whatever, versus rather than like, no, we don't want this because it's, the US controls it and we don't want to have this power held over us. Like, no, that's not how it works. They're going to force it. Most people are going to accept it willingly. And it does, I don't know, like we got the Bitcoin dollar thesis by Mark Goodwin. I don't know how that plays out, but it seems to be, we're going to test it. We're going to test the hypothesis. It seems like they're going to push this, and it's the next arrow.
I mean, I'll even strengthen your point, Rod, in that, like, yes, the stable coins were on the bargaining table for the Iran negotiations, but the Genius Act is not a Bitcoin bill. It's a stable coin bill, and it's a stable coin bill that essentially, as David Sachs said on the All In podcast, prevents
you mean the Clarity Act?
No, the Genius Act.
Oh, okay.
The first one, not the one that's like on the table now, but the Genius Act that was done last year. It was rooted all about whether, or not all, but like the main talking point that was circulating was around the fact that like you or I cannot collect interest on our stablecoin deposits. And it was done so that it helped smaller local banks who typically offer higher interest returns on deposits time to like catch up, essentially. They created this regulatory moat, but like they're pushing the stable coins here in the US as well. In one way or another, like they will come here. And it goes back again to GMONEY, what you were talking about. Like, I don't want these things to happen, but I don't know, man. I've just read too much history, and maybe I need to like not keep reading Ayn Rand and George Orwell, but like we are coming closer to a Chinese social credit system when you have a fully digital money that you can just at the whim of the government turn off. We've seen bank accounts get weaponized in this country, and Bitcoin Well, headquartered in Canada, all of our Canadians customers know very well, as do all Bitcoiners, about the Canadian trucker fiasco. Where my concern comes into play is not, oh, will Trump do that? Maybe not. But if the systems are set up and in place, who's to say the next group in charge, the next president, won't then use their power to say, hey, you sent a tweet that was mean about Israel. We're going to close your bank account, which is happening right now, by the way, but neither here nor there.
Well, I think what you realize is that once Trump has implemented the standard, he takes away that power from future presidents, right? Like there's only one chance we get at this. And when it's fully onboarded into our system, governments can't just print energy out of thin air without huge repercussions. Okay. And that's why you now see we're at $40 trillion of debt, right? And so all this stuff is being done at a rapid pace. And eventually, right, that's going to turn into 50, 60, 70. And so what you're going to find out is that the money printer loses its effectiveness at actually doing things. And all that money is going to get sucked up into Bitcoin. And what's going to happen in the next presidential term, right? The president can print all the money he wants, but who's going to go work for an inferior currency at that point? You can't print Bitcoin. And that's why, a lot of my mantra is Bitcoin is digital 1776. What happens to governments when they actually have to think about budgets and they have to think about cutting back and all of their budgets are on chain, right? Through a stable coin or whatever. You get full transparency because right now it's we the people that have no transparency, but we have no privacy. The only people that have privacy right now are the banks and the governments. Okay. And so we've never had privacy. We've always had surveillance on us. So now what's happening is that's being inverted. Now the surveillance and the transparency is going to be inflicted upon them. Can they survive in a fully transparent world? I don't think so. Not at the scale they are now. And when that happens, right, you're going to eventually get to a GoFundMe bro government. hey, we have this new proposition. We can't print the money because we don't have it. Nobody will work for it.
I see where we disagree. I understand your thesis. I agree that Bessent printing money to buy bonds right now further debases our currency. I agree that leaves our currency in a worse position. I agree that that means that the next administration becomes less effective when they try to print more money to get us out of whatever hole we find ourselves, and so on and so forth until eventually the dollar collapses. I agree wholeheartedly with you on that point. Where we disagree is I don't think Trump is having Bessent print money with an eye on let's destroy the dollar so the next president can't do this. I actually just believe he thinks that he buys the line of like, we can just print ourselves out of this problem.
That doesn't logic out though. You can't logic that out all the way. Because Donald Trump is implementing a Bitcoin standard. Okay. He's bringing crypto. And if you hold on a second, if you believe Bitcoin is fragile, and you think stable coins are going to be Bitcoin, right? Like that's kind of the edge you're giving me. But when in reality, the adoption of all the crypto, doesn't matter if it's a shitcoin, whatever, let everybody have at it. And you realize Bitcoin is anti-fragile technology, that it will win and beat out all of them because not only hash power, but decentralization and all the other things that come along with it. Then you realize that eventually the onboarding of the entire crypto army is a Trojan horse for Bitcoin, because at that point, there is no power left besides Bitcoin. All the shit coins will, maybe there's a couple of them left. They're stable coins. But then you realize that being implemented does in fact debase American power and presidential power in the future. There's no jumping around it. I mean, that is a straight line to loss of American power at the end. No matter whatever timescale you put it on, whether you want to crank it up or slow it down. And I don't see how you logic your way out of saying Donald Trump implementing a crypto standard would actually defeat that. So I guess I don't understand your logic in there.
My logic has nothing to do with the crypto standard. It has nothing to do with adopting Bitcoin. My logic and what I'm saying essentially is that Trump is not printing money with an eye on not letting future presidents print money.
But that's the result. That's the result.
Right.
What do you say?
The point I'm making is like, he is not doing it because he thinks about that result. You are making the assumption.
Do you know that?
He believes.
Do you know that?
But I would, the same question back to you. That's my point.
But the whole point is that at the end of it, that's what's going to happen.
Right. Please.
Both of you are like overthinking or like thinking too into it. I think what Trump is doing is he's got a certain set of tools, and he knows that there's like time decay on the value of being able to print the dollar or to do whatever to manipulate the bond market. We're in this kind of moment in history. I think we're going to look back like similar to previous, I don't want to get into the burning stuff, but like that type of thinking where everything's starting to kind of grind and seize up. And like, everything's up for grabs. Greenland was like a big topic of conversation. I don't think that's gone. Destroying the bond market is another thing that's up for grabs. The invasion of Iran and this battle over who controls the Strait of Hormuz. Trump is basically, what I think he's thinking about is that there's a certain set of tools that they've got, and if they don't use them now and they don't make their move to grab things, they're going to lose either in the midterms, they're going to lose the ability to do that after this year, or if the Democrats take over in 2028, like, he's saying, I'm using these tools now to do what I think needs to be done to get control of the energy markets in the Middle East, to get control of strategic positions near the Arctic, because Europe's falling apart and we're not going to be able to rely on them to use their bases when we need to launch military exercises in Africa or the Middle East. He's using the tools that are available, and I don't know if he thinks this is going to destroy the dollar and screw everybody else over that comes after me, or if it's going to be, just thinking about we need to onboard people onto Bitcoin. I think he's just using his tools he's being very, very high time preference. And I think one of the reasons, maybe if he's not even thinking about it consciously, is I can afford to do these very high risk, high reward, high time preference things because there is a release valve. Bitcoin is a release valve. If this doesn't work, I'm not destitute. If the dollar goes to shit, I'm not destitute because I've got Bitcoin or I've got access to these alternative dollar denominated, whatever. He's using Bitcoin because it gives him, like it gives all of us, optionality. And so he's using the optionality.
That honestly made the most sense of any of our ramblings. So thank you, Rod, because you are the voice of reason to G-Money and I's absolute buffoonery here. But before I let G-Money comment, I want to remind everyone who's watching, hop on over to bitcoinwell.com, sign up. We are the only non-custodial exchange available in the United States. We're available all over the world. Use promo code podcast and you'll get free points on the wishing well, and you'll be able to earn some free Bitcoin with that. And please, if you're watching on YouTube, like and subscribe so that I can prove that these actually are being watched by more than just me and my army of bots.
Yeah, love it. Bitcoin well, guys. Get your Bitcoin into self-custody, right? Stop leaving it on exchanges. What are we doing? Every Bitcoin you have in self-custodial is a fight against the tyranny of central bankers. And so when we're getting into this, it's hard to fathom Bitcoin as anything less than a weapons technology, right? And that's why I'm really big on this thesis from Jason Lurie's software thesis that talks about Bitcoin as a weapon system, and that this weapon system is being used globally to defeat this invisible enemy that's been around for thousands of years. Okay. And so I think people really need to understand it from that perspective. I'm trying to build people in a positive way to build conviction, right? Because imagine, right, if people understood and Bitcoiners understood that Bitcoin wasn't just about like the number go up stuff. Like this was a revolution. You are part of one of the most important technological revolutions that have ever taken place, right? This is 5,000-year-old technology being brought to light. It's the most exciting thing that's ever been invented in the last 5,000 years, right? And I think when we look at it that perspective and we're not arguing over the politics and everything else, like it's much, much bigger than any of us. And that we're not thinking big enough, right? We're literally not thinking big enough in how this is going to change the world. And so I'm just happy to be a part of it. I think we're all on the same team. I don't like fighting over the ins and outs, but like, look, the people that are here to attack Bitcoin, like the BIP 110 retards, like I'm going to call them out, right? Because that in fact was one of the stupidest arguments we ever had, and it was listening to some of those people talk that had no idea about what this really is. And so, we got to protect it, but we also got to like call people out for being idiots about it. But yeah, I don't know where else we want to go with this, but again, I think of this as a weapon system. I think of this as one of the greatest non-kinetic weapons ever developed, and that we're winning this fight, and that Donald Trump has helped ushering us over to the other side. And when we wake up one day and Bitcoin is $500,000 a coin and everything else is relatively calm, right? The prices are going to go up naturally, but they're not going to go up in a way that's going to be chaotic. I think you can start to see the outlines of a bigger plan here, guys, at this point in the game. I think we're seeing that. And so, yeah, that's what I'd say.
No, this has been great. And we'll do this again. G-Money, we'll pick up the back and forth. Ultimately, whenever I have conversations with people I disagree with, what I find is the end result, we all want the same thing. All of us here are on the same mission of hyper-Bitcoinization. We want to see Bitcoin become the global standard because we realize that broken money leaves the world broken. How we get to that final destination, we may not agree on, but ultimately the finish line is the same for all of us. And, I cited this last week. We don't need to pull up the clip again, but Christoph Waltz, Simon Sinek had this interview where he quoted Christoph Waltz talking about his character from Inglourious Bastards. And when he was asked, Christoph, how did you play evil? It's like he wasn't evil. Like, he believed he was good. I don't believe anyone does anything. Well, there are some terrible people, sure, but by and large, most people believe that they are doing what is right and what is just. Make sure that your family and friends continue to be annoyed by your Bitcoin rhetoric, because this is our way of helping them. This is our way of making sure that they and their wealth, their time, their energy is safe from further dollar debasement, because we are going to see a lot of it. Rod, to your point, I think with what tools the government has available, it's to print money and to spend money in a variety of ways. And all that will naturally do is further debase our currency. You know, when the Bank Secrecy Act came out and they said any transactions above 10K have to be reported, inflation adjusted, that would mean in modern terms, $80,000 transactions. Any transaction below $80,000 worth of energy, time, and money would have to be reported. But with inflation, we have slowly and quietly lowered that threshold. That is my rant. Rob, GMONEY, I will turn it to you two before we sign off and say our farewells to everyone who has been watching.
Yeah. Something we talked about in the Bugle Weekly podcast last year, at the beginning of Trump's term, is that we were wrong. Well, I think we were early. We said that Donald Trump was going to realize that he could press that orange button, send Bitcoin to the stratosphere, and the euphoria and like all the memes and just the way things go when Bitcoin's in a bull market would serve as a distraction from all the other stuff that he didn't want people focusing on and he didn't want to deal with. I still think that he is going to come up to a point where he tries to use that. I think that there's a potential that they realized how much Bitcoin Iran had, how much mining they were doing, and they basically wanted to nuke the price to weaken Iran before the war, weaken Venezuela before they went in and got Maduro. And I think there's a lot of stuff that he can do with Bitcoin that he doesn't, especially because it's so new, that he doesn't need Congress for. And if the Republicans lose the Senate, that would be maybe one of his only tools that he could use. And so I still think that's possible. And I think that Trump, for better or for worse, is not done pumping and using Bitcoin to its full potential. And whether it's for good or bad, where it goes totally chaos and haywire or not, you want to have that in cold storage before he does it, not after. You don't want to wake up and we God candle to 250K because, the Federal Reserve announced or some central bank announced that they were going to buy God knows how much Bitcoin. You want it before that happens. You want it in cold storage before that happens. You want it in cold storage in case they 6102 it, going back to the depression comparisons we were making earlier. You don't wait, is what I'm saying. I think he's going to push the orange button. I don't know why, and I don't know when, but you don't want to wait. You want to do it. You want to get Bitcoin in self-custody before he pushes it.
Yeah. This is not just a revolution of finance. It's also a revolution of taxation, okay? Because all taxation is theft. And so what you're seeing and we're going to see in new societies is that you're going to see things by voluntary association, and that we don't need to use coercive means at the end of a barrel of a gun to have consensus on how we communicate and how we govern ourselves in the future. Right now, we've seen that Doge has exposed over 99.9% of all your taxes go to waste, fraud, and abuse. Okay. And so what we're doing now is we're literally complying and aiding and abetting a criminal enterprise with the payment of taxation, with the voluntary payment of taxes. Okay. And so what we're going to see as this technology moves on, governments are going to be debased because they no longer have the power to print money. And they're going to have to actually go to their citizens. And the beautiful thing about that is only the good stuff is going to get funded in the future, right? If you want to commit genocide like the Zionist regime of Israel is doing, the biggest terrorist nation on the planet, okay, that's not going to happen anymore, okay? Because you're going to have to convince everybody to pay for the bombs to go blow up people, okay? It's also going to not allow the creation of biolabs in Ukraine, okay? Because we the people are in charge. And the second that flip switch is switched, power immediately returns to the people. Okay, because it's not the people that should be afraid of their governments. It's the governments that need to be afraid of their people. And at the ultimate end of this, the entire world gets a digital 1776, not just Americans. Okay, this movement spreads worldwide. And look, have faith in your president. Look at it from a different angle. Okay, zoom out a little bit. Don't get so emotional, and just realize we got this, baby. Let's go.
I see what you did there. But I want to remind everyone, as we talk about buying Bitcoin and keeping it in cold storage, hop on over to bitcoinwell.com, use promo code podcast so I can keep bringing you guys podcasts and prove to my boss that people actually are paying attention. And of course, if you're looking to buy a larger amount of Bitcoin and need help, hop on over to bitcoinwell.com/infinite and meet with one of our Bitcoin advisors today. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me. If you're on YouTube, please like and subscribe down below. We will be back on Friday with a very special episode talking about the surveillance state. Until then.